All right, welcome everybody. We're going to have a conversation today. We're going to talk about managing change and uncertainty, and the angle we're going to be looking at it through mental fitness. And I'll explain what mental fitness is as I go through. The format we're going to use, we have about an hour. I'm going to spend about 35 to 40 minutes going through some few slides to give you some ideas. At the end, we'll make sure the PDF's available so you can have this so you don't have to worry about too many notes. And the goal of this is to try to provide a few ideas and to help people navigate a really interesting time in our world. And whether those changes are happening in the workplace or environmentally, meaning outside work, adversity loads and different challenges, adapting to change and adapting to stress is something we're going to be spending some time talking about. The learning objectives, we're going to talk about change, which there's lots of it happening in this world. And there's lots of uncertainty that's happening every day. There's all kinds of uncertainty. And I'm not just talking geopolitical or polycrisis, I'm just talking about legislations are changing, expectations are changing, standards are changing, and that can put extra drain on folks. We're going to spend a little bit of time talking around making sure that we're clear about some ideas around general mental health. Mental health literacy is still pretty low, and folks are often, when they hear the word mental health, we sometimes will move to the concept of mental illness. This program that we're going to spend today talking about is all going to be around mental health. And think about mental health much like a battery metaphor. If you think about my cell phone, for example, I need to do something for my cell phone to actually stay charged. And that activity, the behavior requires me to plug it in and have the patience to allow it to charge. Now, I think it's pretty important for us when we're even starting to anchor some ideas around mental health. Even a simple cell phone needs time to charge. And it may not look like it's doing anything, but it's taking time to charge. And what we sometimes happen in this transactional world, some people are looking for the quick fix. And sometimes the biggest thing we can do for our mental health is to give ourselves some time to pause. And we'll talk a little bit about what that looks like. Lots of us are living in a world that we're reactive. And what can happen with that is we can be spending up a lot of time generating emotion. And all emotion is a neurochemical, and all your thoughts are neurochemicals. These are driven by two things that we experience in our lives, and that's one, what the environment does, and the other is our thoughts that we generate. Those two things will construct our perception of what's happening in the world. Two people in the exact same situation can have two different experiences. And it's important for us all to know that we all have different adversity loads before we even start this conversation. Now, think about that, your invisible backpack. Some of us have financial stress, some of us have domestic stress, some of us have children stress, some of us have parent stress, some of us have challenges with our maybe our commute or our neighbors or things, all the things that are happening to us before we even come to the workplace. And we want to acknowledge that. And as we're starting to move through it, one of the things I'm going to spend some time today is helping us set a concept that's within our control. What that basically means, between every thought we have and every action, there's a gap. We sometimes don't realize we do have some choices. And so before we get into, this conversation of uncertainty, I'd like to anchor something up front, a model called calm. And from a mental fitness perspective, all mental fitness is, the word mental fitness is what do we do with intention to generate positive emotion, period. The percent of time you spend in positive emotions versus unpleasant emotions will impact how we see the world. The challenge with us, sometimes we believe that unpleasant emotions are bad. We actually need unpleasant emotions because that's where a lot of our growth will happen. Failure, for example, regret, setbacks in our life, though they're painful, they can have profound learnings that can help us get us and change our trajectory. In the interim, though, between every stimulus and response, and as we're dealing with life, a mental fitness practice that we can start to master in our head is to start to become clear of what's in our control. I can't control everything outside. I can't control what happens. The thing I can have some control in is how I react to what's happening in my environment. Just because I say it, as Scott Peck would say, just because I say it doesn't mean it's easy. It takes practice. I mean, it's like golf. You can go out if you're a golfer and you or may not be, or a bowler or crocheter or whatever you do. If you want to get good at something, you need to practice it. The thing that I want to anchor before I get into calm is that when you do these types of webinars, it's knowledge transfer. Confusing information with learning is a mistake in our culture. What I'm going to do is provide some information. We'll provide an opportunity for you to look at it later. For you to actually transfer that into learning, into behaviors that can actually become useful, will require you practicing. And what'll happen is lots of folks will go to trainings and they'll hear information and they'll wonder why a week or two later they may not be using it or benefiting from it. And the most important thing is the information could be useful, but useful information is not really useful unless we're actually using and applying it. The calm approach, whenever uncertainty, a difference between what you want and what you have, is stress. Uncertainty is unknown, things that are happening that we can perceive that are outside our control that can create a difference between what we want and what we have. Uncertainty can create concerns around real or perceived. Our brain could take an idea, like for example, you meet someone that you really are interested in, and you're single, for example, and you want to meet them, and you'd like to be able to go on a date, and they said they're going to call you, and so the uncertainty is, do they really like me or they don't like me? And I can spend hours worrying about if they like me or not, and I can sit with uncertainty, are they ever going to call me? But I can't control the fact if they're going to call me or not. All I can do is control what I actually have, and that's what I know and where I'm at. So the metaphor may sound simplistic around calm is catch it, notice when uncertainty is showing up. Change, uncertainty, stress, could be clarity or control. Things that are outside my control. For example, all the geopolitical stuff outside our control. We can catch it and we can start to notice that's happening. And then we can name it and we can name what is happening without judging ourselves. Just because something's happening doesn't, we can acknowledge it's okay to feel upset. It's okay to feel concerned. It's okay to feel worried. Lower it, use a reset skill, which is part of it is going to be practicing and pausing. And one of the best reset skills we have that can impact we have a sympathetic response system, stress response, your parasympathetic system that you're calming. The best thing we have when we're consciously awake to help our nervous system calm is our breath. Deep, calm breaths can calm us, gives us space. And the next thing is to move forward, choose one small action within our control. And sometimes what we our best action sometimes is just to pause and allow some time. Think about those emails. Maybe we get upset with somebody and we send an email in haste, for example, versus we're upset, we catch we're upset, we admit we're really frustrated. We take a couple of deep breaths. We might write the email and leave it, get our thoughts out, vent, go away and come back and reread it. So we've kind of moved away from it. And then that way, what we're doing is we're doing things with intention and our control. Why this matters is that because in this world, there's going to be so much complexity for everybody. The one thing we recently published a study with the University of Toronto and CSA, and workplace mental health in Canada continues to be a problem where employers are spending over $100 billion a year dealing with this issue. And my data suggests that's probably 3x that. So the whole point for you as an audience is that this is real. There's a whatever sector you're in, whether it's in the healthcare sector, in the caregiving sector, whether you're a mechanic, whether you're construction, every sector in the country, workplace mental health continues to be a challenge. And so if we start to look at it, the part of the challenge of this is the root cause. We call those psychosocial factors, things that are how we organize work, for example, is a psychosocial factor. So if I understand what my shift is and I like my shift and I can predict I'm going to work the same shift, that could be a charge and it's manageable. But when I don't know what my shift is and I continue to change my shift and flip who I'm working with, that can become a drain. And frequency, duration, and intensity, that can become stressful depending on how we can regulate. The thing that I want to make sure that's really clear as I go through this too, and some people may have a different model or belief than I do, but I've been doing this workplace mental health stuff and seeing patients for nearly 40 years. And the one thing that I've come to the conclusion is mental health is a team sport. It depends on not just how you can regulate your own emotions, but it's also going to be based on your support systems, your social connections, and your workplace experience. And that's why when we talk about psychological health and safety, I believe it's a system issue. But it's also great advantage for us to develop some mental health skills because that's a protective factor. And a protective factor are things that can mitigate harm. So if in the context of this talk today, change and uncertainty are always happening, and you may have those or that are real for you, expectations continue, priorities change, roles, information is often incomplete. People expect to adapt real time, and that can create confusion. And when change and uncertainty are not managed, it can drive fatigue and frustration, focus, clarity, confusion, strain, and it can create reactive, and people can feel they're reacting, they're trying to catch up. That again is draining people's battery. So a quick reflection. I can't see you. There's a small group. I'm going to give you a second, but I'd like you to just on your own, wherever you're at, and no one's going to ask you a question, but this is more for you to get your own internal dialogue going. Where am I at today? How am I coping with all the change I have in my life today? And uncertainty. And I'd like you to be answering that question at home and work. At home, I could be one low, five high. Work, one low, five high. And what kind of things are driving this uncertainty? And some for folks, it could be financial health, worry about paying bills, and if they're going to be able to. Some people could be, my job security. Some people could be dealing with, my team, like short staff, whatever it could be. And then you ask yourself, okay, if all this is happening, what is one thing I can currently navigate? Well, you may not be able to control the environment, but there may be an opportunity to learn how to navigate your own internal regulatory system a bit. And if where is it showing up the most of my work right now? Is it how we're organizing work? Is it the interpersonal relationships and communications, or is it you don't know if you're going to have the right equipment or supports? And if you were to ask yourself what's really if there's a symptom load that's coming from all this, is it, stress like anxiety, anxious, worried? Is it your battery is drained and you're just kind of feeling you're putting one foot in front of the other? Or do you find you're having a hard time staying on task or you're forgetting and confusion? Why I ask those questions is that not very many people I know of are firing at 100% in all cylinders. And what I think what happens is that most folks want to believe they're doing okay, but building on this battery model, if you think of energy as you're fully charged and drained, reduces your capacity, as you see on the screen. The reality is human beings have a finite capacity. It's not unlimited. And so the other thing that's really interesting about humans, human beings are not perfect and they will make mistakes and they will have hard times and they will have challenges. And then one thing that's for sure about life that's very much like taxes, you know you're going to get taxes and you know you're going to have challenging days. Hope is not a plan. In the world of us for mental health, the one thing that can really increase our armamentarium, can really help us as individuals, is when we actually slow it down and just do some reflecting of what am I doing with intention daily to charge my battery. Now it's interesting. When I did a talk yesterday with 400 or 500 people in Halifax, and I asked people at their table because it was a pretty big room, and I said there were tables 8 to 10. I said, sit at your table and look to a person to your left or right, and tell them what your plan is, your mental fitness plan or your personal mental health plan. And the reality is, many people don't have one. And if you ask lots of people about physical health, they might have an exercise plan. They exercise 3 days a week, or they have a Fitbit watch and they walk 10,000 steps, or they're making sure they're tracking their sleep and they're getting 25% at least of the sleep and REM, and they're making sure they get their 7 hours to 8 hours. They're paying attention to how much water they're drinking so they're not dehydrated, so they don't have headaches. They're paying attention, they're doing some stretching. They're doing something. They're paying attention to their sugar, so they're reducing their risk for, as we call that, type 3 diabetes. That's the debate around that and what that can do to dementia, Alzheimer's, etc. They pay attention to what they put in their mouth. Mental health is really about what are you doing that creates positive emotion. Like, I know he's not here right now, but one of the things that I have in my life that's a constant battery charger for me is a little bulldog named Lincoln, who's about 40 pounds. And he gives me a tremendous amount of joy. And I spend a lot of time working from my desk at home, and I go out and I do my travel when I need to, more than I like to some weeks. And but I know what I have. I got up this morning, I did my thing, I did my golf, and I know what I'm going to do tonight. I have my cold plunge, my sauna. I have this routine I follow. But I'm doing things with intention that are in my control. Now I'm different at stage of my life. My kids are all growing up, and I know I didn't have as much time when I had 3 children running around, but I still did things with intention where I could take those moments. It's amazing what 5 minutes can do of quiet, or catching walking outside in bare feet and getting grounded. All my point is, as we're talking about this conversation, the environment can do things that can help. There's lots of patients in my life that show up at my office and they say their first priority is the world has to change first. And so I'll choose to be miserable until the world changes. And that's one way to look at things. There's another way to look at things is what is in my control. And ultimately, I have the choice to make some decisions of what I want to learn how to do. Unfortunately, we didn't teach people interpersonal skills. We didn't teach people emotional regulation. We didn't teach people how to develop mental fitness. We didn't teach people how to develop positive emotions. We didn't teach people that from a neuroplasticity perspective, that many folks are programming their own unwell-being. So what happens is that we can start to get people to become more aware. At least they move to free choice. And that doesn't mean perfection. Like you could be a Navy SEAL and be the strongest human being in the world, cognitively, emotionally, tough, like whatever Navy SEALs can do that most people can't. But they can still break based on the environment. So we're not trying to become Navy SEALs, obviously. But what would be good for us to understand what's draining our batteries is workload, all the things that could be uncertainty, and realize that the symptoms of cognitive overload, we're hearing more people using the term burnout these days, which is encouraging because all that means that we're lowering stigma around mental health. The good news is if someone says I'm burnt out, they probably aren't. They're frustrated because patients that I've worked with that are really burnt out and moved in states of apathy, they're not able to articulate what they are. So if you start to think about patience, tolerance, reactive behavior, when our batteries charge, we often have more tolerance. When our batteries drained, we can be more irritable. That's human. So what can we do to help our battery? Well, if we have a change or a difference between what we want and what we have, a change can be the stressor. So why change becomes a challenging is because many people hold on to their routine or hold on to their norm. You could see many people in the workplace that they can be complainers, angry, frustrated, miserable, but then you try to change things, they only get more angry, miserable because you've changed things. But if you sit back and say, well, you weren't happy before, yeah, but at least I knew what was going on, which if you think about it is makes sense from their perspective because they knew the game. But it may not have been a great game, but they knew it. What happens is because they don't know what the variance is. See, at least when they're unhappy, they know what the variance is. Like, okay, this sucks, but it sucks in that box, so I know what the box is. Now you change something. If I get a bigger box, my risk is things could suck more. So that can actually raise emotions of shock, loss of control, and that's very common, or a person gets stuck in the past. And from a change management perspective, when you're dealing with change management, it's not just the system changing, it's all the individuals in the system. They all don't change blinking lights. They don't all go green the same time. Some are red, some are yellow, some are green, and some move from red to yellow into green, meaning they accept it. But through these responses to change is the point I'm trying to make for you is under stress if we're not mindful of what's happening and we don't have a strategy to deal with how to stay calm. It's normal to be frustrated. It's normal to have doubt. It's normal to have, you know, different types of behavior that could be moving us away from a social norm. And this is a human response. And it's protective behavior. That's my point. When a person's reacting or upset, that's a protective behavior. Anger is the only emotion that we have that we know clearly what we want. We want something to stop or we want something to start. It's a very purposeful emotion. It's a great emotion. Anger is not the problem. It's what people do with anger. So as we start to move through this, if we want to increase our probability to be able to deal with adversity loads and challenges of life, yes, it's great when we're in a loving, caring environment at home and we're in a workplace that actually cares about our well-being. And we have peers who care about each other. Because peers can be like charging stations. You think about like a car, well, a caring peer can be like a charging station, and every peer can actually help each other. But when change and uncertainty can put pressure on our mental health, and flourishing is when a person's battery is fully charged. Unfortunately, lots of human beings are feeling just they're barely keeping up. They're reacting to life. And when things become overwhelming, they can move into languishing. Doesn't mean mental illness. There's lots of people who can spend 70% of their time on unpleasant emotions, a lot of time, their fight, flight, or flight, fight, freeze, fawn responses going. Lots of cortisol level, lots of pressure, lots of worry, lots of tension. And again, that's happening because that's their protective behaviors trying to exist. My goal is to help us step back and identify if we are languishing or reacting. There are things we can do to move from languishing and flourishing, but it's not going to happen by next Tuesday. Like realistically, if I want to lose 4 pounds, well, how do I lose a pound? Well, 1 pound is 3,500 calories. So I have to burn more calories than I take in. So if I burn, making it simple, I burn 100 and I take in 80. Well, there's 20 calories deficit. Well, do the math how long you get to 3,500. Luckily, it can be a little bit different, be a couple hundred calories, but losing a pound or two a month is really probably the right pace. So if I want to lose 30 pounds, it could take 6 months if I want to do it correctly. And not the goal shouldn't be about losing weight. The goal should be creating a lifestyle that sets me up to becomes habit so I have the energy I want. Mental health is the same. It's not binary. I tell lots of clients, they ask me how long does it take to, move from point A to point B? And I'll say, well, how long do you think it takes to learn a new behavior, one behavior? Let's say we have to change 5 behaviors and we need to learn 2 new habits. How long? And they go, well, 21 days, they heard read. And I go, no, no, the research is, it could take an average anywhere between 60 and 180 days, change something, but the reality, it'll take as long as it takes. You might get distracted. Someone might be a family emergency. You might go over here and might have to come back and get back on plan. But to get from point A to point B about mental health it's a process, not an event. So when drains and outpace our capacity, that's when we put ourselves at risk that we have a coping crisis. On my website, if you're interested, you can go to my website, Howard HR, and in under the resources is a free ebook called The Coping Crisis. It's all about Sam. And the reason I'm telling you about it is so you can get a free resource. But it's all written about the story of Sam and through Sam's eyes on how Sam ended up having some challenges in life that he was struggling. He thought he had a mental health issue, which really was a coping issue. He didn't know how to deal with what was going on. I believe we have a coping crisis in our society as much as we have a mental health crisis because I think what happens is there's so many different moving parts. Sometimes it's hard for us to decide where we can focus and what we can do. So in the tense of for you, if we know our drains are getting us and we want to become more charged to deal with what the challenges are in life, a good self-check tool that we can actually start with is our baseline. Take a moment, choose where you are now. Like I feel steady and able to manage and cope daily, or I'm functioning, but I'm tired. I live my life Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and I'm by 10 o'clock at night, I'm exhausted every day. For language, I feel drained. I'm finding it harder to cope. I'm tired. I don't know. I'm finding it more challenge. It's like I'm spending more time on unpleasant emotions. And if we're clear what's driving it right now, there could be a poor relationship. It could be something to do with work. It could be how we're processing. But if we start to think about one small thing that could help stabilize me, where I have actually saw a lot of clients and patients over the year, it's a center of what I can control. I can't control what's happening to me, but I can learn to have more positive intention in how I react and respond to my environment. And like any new skill, it will take time to develop my mental fitness. So a mental fitness approach, which I believe is a protective factor, is intentionally learning how to manage our thoughts, our energy, and our responses. The cool thing about how our brain is that we can actually learn new habits and we can change our emotional state. But what happens is some of us may not realize you have three brains. You have your brocus brain, which is your cognitive part, which you're listening to me. You have your midbrain, where your reactions are and your emotional memories are. And then you have your habit center, your old brain. And some of us actually just have habits. And those habits are stored in kind of heuristic shortcuts. It's almost think of it like a program. And some people program they from the time they get up in the morning, they're edgy or they're short or they're defensive. And what happened is they learned a program. The cool thing about our brain when we can start to change our programming. And we can actually start to learn how to change how we set expectations for what good is. If I said to the average human being, tell me what a good life looks like for you, you'll get a pause from a lot of folks. And the challenge is why we have so many folks that are unhappy is because they haven't defined what good looks like. Lots of folks are just going from Monday, Friday, they're going from meeting to meeting, they're going from paycheck to paycheck, they're going from event to event because there's so much stimuli. There's so like data, there's so much information coming at us. If we can get people to slow down and do a little bit of thinking, is first of all is getting some different tools. And so what I want to do is say to yourself, okay, if all this stuff's happening, going back to the calm model, which I talked about up front, pause and labeling is a great tool. This is slow the moment down. Feeling overwhelmed, when change is certain, speed up. This can be a stress response. What we can do is we can pause briefly, notice what's happening, and name it. Going back to that calm model. Examples, this is uncertainty, I'm feeling overwhelmed, I'm reacting. By we have learned by getting it out of our head, and you'll be amazed by speaking it. Lots of us sing in the shower, I'm sure. But if I can actually name it and say, okay, I'm feeling overwhelmed, or I'm feeling, but when we take it out of here and we say it, now it's out here. And then why that can help us, it can start to reduce the intensity because we're no longer looping. We're actually naming it to start to try to tame it. Is it a symptom relief? Will it stop immediately? No, but it can actually help create what this is a gap. The more we can create gaps and slow our thoughts down, because what happens is if you think about how the brain is, like worrying, for example, well, worrying was put into your DNA for survival. It's a really, really good, important skill. You're driving down the road and my gas tank is on empty. My worrying starts on what I start looking for the gas. And I start noticing I'm looking. As soon as I see the gas, I pull off and fill my gas and I stop worrying. That's normal. It's good. But the worrying is to make sure we don't forget. But for some of us, we don't turn worrying off. The same thing is, so when you have a stress thing, it can become overwhelming. But if we can actually acknowledge it and we know it is, but that's what's happening. But that may be out of my control. Ground and breathe. As I said, your parasympathetic nervous system, going back to the calm model, one of the coolest things we can do is learn how to just take a breath. Breathe in slowly 4 seconds, exhale 6 seconds, repeat 3 to 4 times. You can do this when you're walking, sit it doesn't matter. It is the most proven technique we know. For example, going back to Navy SEALs, and you'll see tools like, Mental Health Commission will teach breathing as a part of their technique and their opening minds, that which came from the military's program. That because we know teaching people how to breathe, if you're feeling like it's life or death and you're overwhelmed because you've never had people shoot at you before, you need something quickly to bring someone's physiology down. Well, we know this works. And what can happen is practicing deep breathing under pressure by calming can slow your nervous system down by activating your parasympathetic. I've had lots of people, especially males over the years, say, breathing doesn't work. Well, they haven't spent enough time breathing because just because you started breathe, I'm not calm yet. Well, okay, that's all right. Let's do it a few more times. Focus on what you can control. Again, in this world, there's going to be a lot of things that are difference between what we want and what we have. There's a whole, it's like in golf. We were talking about fast greens and the ball you had a good putt and the ball goes off the green. It is what it is. You can react, get mad. It's not going to help you in your next shot. Because in golf, one of the most important things is not the shot you had, it's the next shot. Isn't that interesting, the parallels with life? it isn't really what happens to you, it's how you react. I told you a number of couples over the years that were in my office not because of the incident, but because how one of them reacted to the incident. And sometimes people overreact and create more damage than they actually have things. So focusing on what you control, redirect your energy is what's actionable is really helpful. But just because I'm saying it doesn't mean it's easy. But these are a proven technique that we can start to actually be really clear what is in my control right now. I can influence my breath. I can take a pause. I can walk out, clear my head. I can call a friend to run some ideas. I can ask for some help. But I can't mysteriously in my head, by no matter how angry I am right now and frustrated, I can't change, for example, some of the political discourse or things that are happening, or I can't change what is happening across the street. That's one of the parts that's really helpful for people to help them regulate their own emotions, to move from feeling helpless to in control, is to start to actually clarify a priority, ask a question, organize the next step, take a short reset, decide what can wait. Does that email have to go right now, or can I send it in the morning? I'll reread it when I'm calm. We're not teaching enough for people to learn how to control what they can do. But that doesn't take, for example, when I do these kind of programs, for example, for an employer, just because we do mental fitness with employees doesn't mean we can give them more stress. Mental fitness is the technique, but the employer still needs to pay attention to the workplace experience. And without going into all the PHS, it's a two-way street. Protect your energy. I think sometimes, whether it's change, uncertainty, and the things that are happening in the world, but they're the way to kind of make it more universal is yes, it can be change. Yes, it can be uncertainty. But anything that creates a difference between what you want and what you have is going to create a stress response. The antecedent, or what's the root cause of it, is the environmental thing. But going back even in a relationship, whether they're going to call me or not, to what's going to happen at work, or will I have a job or not, or is that going to happen? Like, there are things I can and cannot control. But if I can prioritize what matters more, like, I'm going to invest in my own charging my battery. I'm going to set limits where possible. I'm going to take recovery breaks. I'm going to make sure that I'm making TV a priority. If I'm anxious, I'm overworked, instead of watching TV from 10 to 1, I'm going to make myself go to bed earlier. I'm going to start to do what I can do to protect my battery charge. I'm going to start to think about how I can increase my performance for myself, because if I'm thinking clear and I have energy, I can make better choices for myself and for my family. And then 5 is reset and recharge. That's a part of being a human being. We need time to recover. We need space. We need to take time, and we need to accept that. And I say this is assuming that someone wants this. We'll always respond. We'll always not respond perfectly in the moment. So if we're, if we're edgy, especially with parenting sometimes, sometimes we need to take those 5. Notice if I'm off track. Am I showing up the way I want to be found? Because all of us have to decide what brand we want to create. Some people say they don't care. Your brand is how other people perceive you. Every interaction is an opportunity to create a charge or drain or impact or support a relationship. By stepping back and being mindful of what I'm going to do will help me make sure that I put myself within my control, the micro decisions I have to make sure I'm protecting my capacity. Because we're in a world of lots of train and charge. So charging your battery, restore your capability is what I'm promoting in mental fitness. But it starts with the basics. Short recovery breaks. It's amazing what 5 minutes outside sitting down with a few deep breaths can do. Meaningful connections. Every human being needs somebody. Moments of physical reset. Walking is really good. Oxygen is really, lots of folks are not getting breathing properly. Sleep, time away, taking breaks where you can, asking for support when you need it. As Daniel Kahneman would say, who won a Nobel Peace Prize, the biggest mistake with human beings is actually believing what they think is right. I've had lots of people say, yeah, 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 you don't understand. I mean, but just because you don't know the answer doesn't mean there's not one. It's like a car. I go up and start my car doesn't start. I can go, hey, my car's not started. Well, I guess I need a new car. Well, some people might think that's ridiculous. Well, no, the car won't start. I need a new car. Well, no. Well, what do you mean, no? That's ridiculous. Well, why are you saying it's ridiculous? The car won't start. Well, did you call AAA? Well, what's that mean? Well, just because you don't know the answer doesn't mean there's not an answer. That's mental health. That's life. Just because you don't have the answer and we can give you ideas doesn't mean there's not an answer. But too many of us, in the absence of hope, human beings have nothing. That's why we have suicide ideation. That's why people have challenges in the world because they lose the door path. The more we can be mindful and aware that we don't have to have all the answers, that's a mental fitness technique, asking for help. Charges do not need to be big or effective. Like I can spend 5 minutes with my bulldog on my lap, patting him and having him, and that to me that can be great. Or getting a text from my 5-year-old, who's now 8. Now I'm wondering if that's right. She should be texting me, but we could have a whole nother course on that. But it's her mother's phone. But anyway. But constantly matters, intensity, small, regular actions, but doing things with intention to create positive emotion. That's really what this is. And as you leave, and we'll take some questions in a minute, as I said up front, these are wonderful that they provide these knowledge transfer activities. But the work happens not in a webinar. The work happens by you taking the time to sit and reflect afterwards. What's draining me most right now? What is one small action I can take today to start to charge some? What's a micro decision? Lots of people need to learn that to get healthy, sometimes we need to burn energy to create energy. And sometimes things are that might seem impossible. Like, for example, if you're fitness and you're running up 10 sets of stairs, the first day you may not be able to do it. After 3 weeks, you might be able to run the 10 stairs. We have to set realistic views that emotions transfer and learning how to change our emotions and learning how to develop more positivity for ourselves and more energy and more hope and how we can cope with the challenge of life. We have to realize that's not we've had programming for 30, 40, 50, 60 years. We can unlearn some of the old programming, learning new program, but it's not going to happen by next Tuesday. It's a, we need to actually just create a plan. And if we do the small things each day, they get easier. And I tell my patients all the time, I can promise you 6 weeks from now, it's going to be easier than 6 days. But you need to get to 6 days to get to the 6 weeks. There's no shortcut here. And if we can set that up and we can start to create our cues to remind us or anchors or we can do. And ultimately this will come down to your action. That's why I want to make sure you get the deck so at the end you can make a decision what your action will be. Where will I begin? What will I do? There's courses people can take mental fitness little programs where you can develop a personal mental fitness plan. I'll give you a couple ideas. There's after today, what will I do? I could take the calm model. I could take these micro skills and start practicing. For the Globe Mail, I did a lot of micro skill training, and that if you go to my website, there's free ebooks with micro skills and different things there. And what's interesting is we've written like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of articles in different micro skills. There's no shortage of micro skills. Just pick one or two things. Don't overwhelm yourself. The goal is to start thinking things you can create energy. Walking is a great one, for example, for people. Takeaway, change, uncertainty, or root cause stress, demands, drainer capacity. Your energy level will affect how you cope. So if you have more energy, you're going to have more capacity and patience for yourself. Where you're on the mental health continuum, it's very normal that a vast percentage, up to 60% of our population is languishing. 30% of our population is reacting, 10% of our population is flourishing. One out of four people are experiencing mental health challenges. Doesn't mean mental illnesses. So we got lots of people are struggling. And it's a test, and it's not going to get any easier. So early awareness helps prevention. When capacity low, the risk for poor coping increases. Poor coping is maladaptive coping, and that's why lots of people move to alcohol, drugs, food, gambling, etc., because they're looking at different ways to self-soothe those. And we'll do courses around maladaptive and poor coping, but just for today is we're hyper focused is just paying attention what we can do proactively to regulate our emotions. Mental fitness, we gave some tips today, and protecting your energy is not extra work if we're actually, because lots of us will, for example, something happens we don't like. We may not notice it, but if we go complain to five different people about what we experienced, we used a lot of energy to try to get validation. But that doesn't change actually how we feel. And it usually creates, it just actually teaches our nervous system. A lot of human beings don't realize when you're complaining or talking about someone else, your unconscious brain doesn't know the difference. So you're actually turning on your own cortisol levels and you're actually impacting your own physiology. So if we can get people more engaged. So what I'd like to do now with our time we have is we'll take a few questions.
Yeah, so if you had any questions for Bill, we'll just give a the last bit here to get those answered if you want to put them in the chat. I see you have some prompts there too at the bottom. What stood out for you today? What is one challenge people face when trying to protect their energy?
Well, well, people are thinking, what I'll tell you is if you're looking for some ideas on my website, there's some free resources. And we also have a course on mental fitness we've had a lot of people use. I also think there's one through UBC on mental fitness we did as well. Just short little micro courses on how to build a plan.
Someone says they're gonna start practicing calm.
Hmm.
That's
Cool.
great. Someone says one thing I've started to realize is that I need to prioritize my own mental health, but they have a hard time saying no.
Good.
Complaining turns on your own cortisol levels because it is an internal, because it acts against yourself. Makes sense. She said she never thought about it that way.
Yeah, it's very important. Your unconscious brain's like a child. It doesn't know the difference. So what your physiology doesn't either.
100%. Another just breathing, going for a short walk, something they will utilize.
It
I'm
doesn't
not,
have to be complicated.
yeah. No, it doesn't have to be complicated. And they're just good reminders, in general, for sure.